Yo, what is going on, YouTube? I hope you guys are doing fantastic today. Today, we're bringing you the Heavenly Light 9.3 update notes. Now, I know these were 15 days ago.
Nice.
But the patch is now only 4 days away if you're watching it on Friday. And yeah, I figured it was a good time to kind of look at it. You can get an idea of what I think the meta is going to be from these buffs, these nerfs, and then ideas on the skins. Because some of these skins, I will always say Hyris has great skins, always. We'll give this one like a little 9 out of 10. It depends how it looks in game. This one's 10 out of 10. Fantastic. Doombot Hades, probably mid-tier, maybe like 6 or 7. Freezebot Ymir, 9 out of 10. Beakybot Thoth, 0 out of 10 because everybody hates Thoth.
Time to go bye-bye.
Rambo's in Smite, 10 out of 10. This skin is sick. Like, there's so many cool skins. Yeah, I take it back. They're all just 10s. They're all just 10s. Oh, the custom matches is getting a massive revamping. If you haven't, take a look at that. What do we got here? Community avatars. Check those out. Clean skins. The Cthulhu one. Very, very clean. Conquest. All right, first Conquest stuff we get. The biggest thing is right here. Increased base damage dealt to enemy gods by 10%. Damage dealt to minions is unchanged. So tier 1 towers, tier 2 towers are just going to be doing extra damage to everyone on the enemy team. Whether it's squishy, tanky, it's just increased base damage to those gods. Obelisk decreased the sight radius that the Obelisk provides from 30 to 20 units and increased the amount of time it takes to steal an offering from 3 to 4. Honestly, I thought Obelisk was pretty bad. 9.2 patch, and now it's even worse because it takes an extra second for every tick that also takes 15% of your health. I don't see a reason, unless you're just absolutely stomping a game, to even put yourself at a risk of dying right now. So I think Obelisk is pretty much dead now. You'll never really look to invade. It's basically gonna be who can get their stacks first. Nagas no longer provide team gold. Arena, we don't care about Arena. You're now limited to 1 glyph per player. So 1 player can only get 1 glyph. Say player 1 buys a glyph. That's the only glyph they can get. Player 2 can buy that same glyph or any other glyph, and they're limited to just that 1 glyph. I know somebody was confused with this says you can only buy 1 glyph. So like 1 player can only have the breastplate glyph, 1 can only have the heart word. That's not the thing. It's everybody can only have 1 glyph, whichever glyph it is. It can be repeating on your team, on the enemy team, but you only get 1 glyph. Amulet of Silence gets a little buff. I think this item is still a bit underwhelming. I've kind of said that the tank glyphs are just pretty underwhelming compared to the damage ones. And I hope to see a little bit of buffs to these. Because a silence on a 40-second cooldown, it used to be a lot worse when you were clearing minions and you couldn't auto the minions because your auto attack would silence the minions. That was the worst part. It's a little bit better now. Some gods, maybe the silence might be pretty OP. But I just don't see a spot for this to be OP or even like good. I guess if you're buying Heartward anyway, the other one isn't very good, so this one's not too bad. Maybe you'll lean towards this one. This is a pretty sick buff, actually. These Thorns buffs, you saw no Thorns in 9.2, like very, very little. Now you get bonus buffs from 40 to 55 units. Just a slightly increased range, so when you're diving, people outside of that range of 40 units, because 40 units is pretty slow, or pretty small. This buff, I think, is the bigger one of the Thorns. This is the 80-second cooldown Thorns, and auto attacks reduce it by 1 second. Instead of lasting just 2 seconds, it lasts 3, and it returns 35% mitigation. Returns 35% damage before mitigations. Bracer of Illumination. I think this one is sick, but it's just overpowered. I mean, it's just overlooked compared to the overpowered other Bracer. The other Bracer's 20% power and 20% speed at all times. At all times. And it's a Sentry Ward. This one's mostly just focused on vision, first and foremost. You can actually light up almost the entire one side of the map. But I don't think vision is more overpowered than just having permanent speed and permanent movement speed. I still think it might be good, but I do think it's just a little overlooked. A complete rework to Berserkers. The passive changes. The power's down a little bit. Prots are up a ton, actually. Gold is dropped a ton. Attack speed is, I think, the same, and then they tossed on some HP 5. This was changed in the update notes where it can only be built by melee physical gods. So it's something that they changed, but melee physical gods can buy this. Hunters cannot buy Berserker Shield. If you drop below 40% health, you become Berserk for 5 seconds. Berserk provides 7% mitigation, can only occur once every 15 seconds. Honestly, this is going to be a really good item. I genuinely think it might be better than the other one for nearly every god, except some junglers who would just prefer to have a little extra damage. But for solo lane, this is a complete total buff. Next up, Aussie. Nothing's changed with it. It's just written to clarify how it works because it works differently than Berserker Shield. This one is 15-second cooldown. If you drop below 40% health, you get the Berserk. This one, it reactivates immediately upon or taking or dealing. It's so weird to say it, but it can only occur for every 15 seconds also. Blackthorns gets a 5 damage or 5 power buff. Don't think it changes too much. I think it's going to be overlooked still by actual solo lane items. Compare it to even just new Berserker item. You get the same amount of power. You actually get prots on this one. You do get no health with this item, but it's still going to be pretty clean. I just don't see a spot that Blackthorn is going to be built in. Spike's Shield, This changes nothing for Void Shield, and so it's just a buff to the tier 2. But to be fair, this is one of the worst tier 2s to build into because of how awkward it was to buy. It was 650 and then 950. Now it's only 750, and then it's 1200 to go to full Void Shield, but you get 50 extra health on Spike Shield. I don't think this does anything, really. Glide gets a nice buff, another 50 health, slowly working its way back into the meta. It's getting a few buffs. I think the passive of it is still pretty terrible. Kind of hope that they actually buff the passive a little bit instead of buffing the stats. Because genuinely the stats on this item are very, very good. The problem is the passive is near useless. Leather Cowl gets 5 power. I think this might take over Destol as the best starter for ADCs. I think the only difference between Cowl and Destol is that Cowl only has one good starter. We'll lead up and see if this Leader's Cowl is going to be bought. But the Hunter's Cowl is a very good starter, but Destol's both starters are, both level 20 starters are incredible. And they kind of change per game which one is better, and it makes it so you're either unkillable or you're going to be an DPS machine, and I think it's a cool trade-off that Destol has. And I hope that they actually look at buffing Leader's Cowl in some other way, maybe making the passive a little bit better or different, because the stats on it are pretty good. The problem is it's just worse than Hunter's Cowl. Chin size, nice little decrease cost by 26 or by 100 gold down to 2600. If you're buying this before, you're buying it now. If you weren't buying this before, you're not buying it now. Doesn't change anything, it just makes it better. Jotun's Ferocity actually has a nice cooldown buff. Giving this item now 30 seconds instead of 60 makes it so when you're 1v1ing someone with this item, your 1v1 potential is now twice as often. I think it's a very good ranked item, but I think the other one still might be a little bit better just because of that movement speed. It allows you to just kind of get in, and then if you're taking a little bit too much damage, you can scoot on out of there with the movement speed. But I do like the buff to this item, and maybe some gods will be building this. Katana gets a nice little 50 gold decrease. The thing is I think with Stone Cutting still getting like so many buffs, and now it's only 2200 gold. Yes, the prot, swing, and pen, whatever you want to call it, is worse. This is now a 2200 gold item. More power than Jotun's, more pen than Jotun's, just no cooldown, but it does give you movement speed. I'm curious to see if maybe we'll see this back in the jungle again, or maybe we see it in solo lane on some auto attack gods, maybe assassin, stuff like that. I still think it's overlooked. It's going to be still worse than Jotun's, and I think you'll see a lot more Jotun's in the jungle still. This is a nice little buff in the right direction. Katana got a nice 50 gold decrease. Same thing with Chins. If you're buying this before, you're still buying it. If you weren't buying it before, you're still not buying it. Serrated Edge is the exact same cost. These change nothing with it. Same with Golden Blade. I think Golden Blade's still in a fine spot too. Jade Emperors actually quickly buffed. Old Jade Emperors, Hi-Rez did not like how it worked, so they changed it completely and kind of made it a lot worse. But now it's 350 health, which is like the second highest health in the game behind Gaia. And it also has a physical power debuff of 15%. The stats on this are now incredible. The only problem is its price is a little expensive, but I could see this being a nice late game, like Rotted Tahuti-esque item where it's just a really nice, I can't think of the word, I'm blanking on it, but it's a nice expensive option in the late game. Oni's gets a nice little 100 gold buff. I think this helps support more than solo laners, because Bulwark as an item is still more valuable than Oni's. But now you look at this one as 200 gold cheaper than Bulwark, and it gives MP5, which are two big things for support. You want cheap items, and a nice little MP5 tossed in there, sprinkled in there to give it so you can spam abilities a little bit more is always very nice. So I could definitely see Oni's getting picked up a bunch by supports, and I'm going to try it a lot. I'm definitely going to try it a lot. Hebo removed the root on his water spout. Incredible change. This makes Hebo, how do I word this? He's going to be a lot different. He's going to be a lot different. And you're going to have to just play against this to see how it feels. You're going to have to play with this to see how it feels. I think it's going to be a nice big buff, but I don't think it's going to break the character. I know a lot of people are worried about him and this ability, but I don't think it breaks the character. Poseidon, Monarch, decrease across the board. Kraken is now only 100 at all ranks. And then Trident is down 10 at all ranks. So nice little mana buffs for Poseidon. He did feel like he had a lot of mana problems. Life of the Party, Baron, actually gets a nice couple buffs. The self-slow on Life of the Party is now 40% instead of 60. You can move a little bit more as you're pulling people in. Chase a little bit easier. And I say chase, I mean your chase skills are a little bit higher. And then magical power from 6 to 8% on the tick damage. I'm actually curious how many times it ticks, because if it's 10 times, that's 20% of your magical power, which is actually a lot. A little curious about that, but I do think it's a nice little buff for Baron. Doesn't change him in any role other than mid lane, because this isn't going to really make him or break him in solo or support. But this is going to be pretty nice. I think this is trying to just buff him in mid, because he still does see some solo play, some support play, but he is very, very rarely picked. Now the biggest change of the patch. Serqet support is dead. And Serqet jungle with a lot of damage. A lot of power built is now going to be the wave. I'm not going to take time to go through all this because this is a lot of change. But basically, her base damage across the board is nerfed. Her physical power scaling across the board is buffed. And ambush is a bit shorter in range, while also getting a lot lower base damage and a lot higher power scaling. The other important thing is it's no longer 10% of max HP. It's 5% plus 70% of your physical power and 100% of your physical power, this is actually crazy now. Because instead of being just double, it's 5 and 70% at 2. Like, this is going to be, both of these are just buffs. If you're building any sort of power, this is just a buff. And then she also gets mitigation in her ult too. Forgot about that part. 4. Increased range on lightning arcs from 30 to 35. So when he lands and he gets a bunch of damage, they're going to go a little bit farther. Same with lightning damage. It's going up a little bit too. Just 5 at every rank, which is, I don't know, pretty irrelevant. I don't think this changes Thor at all. Heart bomb, extra 10% damage on both the initial and the explosion. Doesn't change him. Jingwei, this is actually a pretty decent buff. 10% of Jingwei's physical power. So now if you're critting for 300 before you pop your 2 and you pop your 2, you're critting for now 360. Pretty nice buff for Jingwei instead of just 330. So I'm kind of bored. I'm not bored. Jingwei is a very boring character, but we haven't really seen her very much, so I don't really mind the buff. X-Ball Poison Dart buff across the board. 16 seconds in the early game. Pretty good. It makes it a lot better poke option. And they have buffed this a lot, so it's a lot more easy to hit and a lot easier to hit multiple targets. And they also buff the damage. So this ability is actually getting a lot of buffs in the past, I don't know, 6 months or something. Frost Breath of Ymir, down from 16 seconds to 16 to 14. Nice little buff. Doesn't really change too much about him. Makes it so he can engage a little bit more, but that's all. Xingqian, kind of just an irrelevant buff in my opinion. The protection buff on his 3 is nice, and the protection duration is nice, but you're not picking Xingqian because of his 3's protections. You're picking it just because he counters ADCs, and he counters some of those mid laners that don't have CC immune ults or dashes. That's kind of the reason you play him. You don't really play him for his 3's extra tankiness he gets. It kind of gives you tankiness just innately, just being able to immune abilities that would hit you before. But this is a big buff, probably the biggest buff in the patch. His late game 1 is now 300 base damage, and you're also usually going some sort of power item on Cthulhu, so this could be hitting for almost 350, 400 in the late game. And on a tank that's already probably the tankiest god in the game, that's going to be a nice buff. Kakulin buff. He gets extra shield health when he's Berserk, and his Salmon Leap and Furious Charge are now down a 1-second cooldown. Pretty nice buff for Kakulin. I'm excited to try him out. With the Oni's, Glad Shield, all the solo lane buffs, I'm excited to see how Kakulin kind of plays out in the meta, because it's been a while. It's been a little bit since Kakulin hasn't been in the meta, but you know, he was in meta for 4 months. It's nice to finally not have him there. This is the additional balance. Alpha Harpy decreased from 38 to 32, 24 to 22, XP in gold. The Naga is 75 to 49, 50 to 33. Shiva gets a little nerf too. They nerfed Hebo's 3 scaling because they buffed his 3's root problem that it has. Fenrir gets extra brutalize protections in his 3, or extra protections in his 3. Serqet gets extra scaling on her Cobra's Kiss, and her Deathbane gets a small damage nerf. This is being done instead of the previous Deathbane nerf. What was the previous Deathbane nerf? Down to 110. Oh, so they just nerfed it a little bit less. So instead of being 50 to 110, it's now 50 to 122. So they dropped the Deathbane nerf a little bit of his base damage. That's nice. Void Stone got a pretty big nerf. Probably kills the item again. I think it was pretty useful at 15%, but at 10%, it's just useless. I don't think we'll see this item again. Same with Runeforge. I think Runeforge was not really built at all in scrims, in high level ranked. I think it was kind of like a more memey fun item than anything else. And it's kind of sad to see it nerfed so hard because it's really just a casual item. Good Nemean nerf. And then there's the Berserker's change. Hunters cannot buy it. Nemean is still going to get bought. You'll see a lot of Nemean still. But there it is. There is the 9.3 patch notes. You'll be expecting this on Tuesday, March 22nd. If you guys got any questions, if you have anything you're excited for, excited to try out, let me know. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for watching the video. See you soon.